Sirs, ma'ams, madams, good afternoon. I was going to start by talking about how when we speak about military artificial intelligence, we immediately think about robots and platforms and try and debunk the centrality of those. But I think something that's come out this morning, and obviously in Professor Hughes' last presentation there, is that nobody really believes that's the main way we can have effects anymore. But what I would perhaps question is this focus on autonomy, because as I see it, autonomy is useful only insofar as it helps humans apply force better. And I think that is something that's important not to lose sight of as we implement or try and implement autonomy across the land environment and defence in general. Now, artificial intelligence is particularly useful, I think, as when it's used as a cognitive capability, especially in the short term, because that is where the technical readiness is, where it can be immediately used. And this means that for the military, it has a lot to add at the higher than tactical levels of decision making. And it's suffered so far to date, I think, with conflation or getting mixed up with concepts such as network-enabled capability and the informationized revolution in military affairs, whereas in fact it's very, very different. And helpfully, the Chinese draw a distinction between informationized and intelligentized warfare. And the key to bridging that distinction is using artificial intelligence to make sense of the vast range of digital inputs that are characteristic of warfare in the information age. Obviously, this would be very useful. We've heard already this morning about the infokinetic environment, about the mind-blowing power of data. So it was certainly useful to be able to use artificial intelligence to help us get to grips with that. The question is, can it? I think another relatively encouraging thing is that no one else has quite cracked it yet either. But what we've seen in terms of civilian artificial intelligence development in recent years, in its ability to strategize and analyze and its capacity for analysis, does make a compelling case for its ability to do so. So what I'm going to talk about next is two ways that I think we could realize this contribution. And there's a lot of military applications of artificial intelligence, and a lot of them we've been talking about for a very long time. And whereas some of them still remain science fiction, there are a disturbing proportion which are clearly realizable, but which haven't yet been realized. So the question we need to ask is not what can we do, rather how we do it in the short term. Now, the two ways that I think we can start to really get the benefits of artificial intelligence are adaptive, not revolutionary. And the first one I would like to talk about is simulation. Now, we talk about simulation a lot with regards to training already, but I'm going to talk about its role in operations planning. The way we do operations planning now is we take a staff headquarters of humans, we do the operational appreciation where we build knowledge and understanding about a situation, then we build on that with the operational estimate. We make the best military plan based on that collective understanding which we've developed. Now, we reach hurdles when it comes to transferring that huge in-depth understanding between humans, and that's where we end up with things like very long PowerPoint presentations and operations orders that number into the hundreds of pages. Investing the knowledge that's developed in simulation can help us overcome that, and it can also potentially help us look at the interdependency between all the different parts of the plan, because the way we deal with that now tends to be to look at all those elements in isolation and again brief a bunch of humans and expect their brains to make the connections. Now, actually, that's a remarkably successful way of doing it. But what simulation can help us with is making that information more easily exploitable, adjustable, and so that we can build our plans based on it. Now, I think what we need to learn from the civilian development of artificial intelligence is that it's not about building a perfect system in the first instance. It's about building a system that can learn and adapt and that's capable of being improved or of improvement itself. The bonus is we already do such a huge amount of work when it comes to operational appreciation. So I think next time we do an exercise, we enter an exercise planning cycle, we should do it in tandem with software engineers that can show how that work can be invested by automating it. And it doesn't matter necessarily if we get the choice of software right in the first instance, it's proving the process, and that's a transferable tool that's useful, as long as we don't necessarily use Excel, which is clearly fully exploited in that it supports operations planning, I think. The gain from simulation supporting operational planning is the obvious one. You can shortcut the manual analysis that we seem to start again every time, and that you can store information so that when it comes to course of action development and wargaming later on, you can do them more rigorously and more flexibly and faster than we do them now. And also, if you make it a learning system, it's potentially a cornerstone of better planning in complex environments where you don't necessarily get the results that you expect from the actions you take. Now, simulation is very difficult, and there's a lot of technology startups that have fallen at the hurdle of trying to do good simulation, but it's potentially worth it because it's simulation that could make that difference between informationized and intelligentized warfare. That is a pool of meaningless data and something that a computer can make sense out of through a model that can be interrogated by various different levels of command. And that accessibility of information gives us the conditions for trusting people to make informed decisions, so supportive of mission command. The second thing I'm going to speak about is definitely artificial intelligence light by any purist's definition, but the impact of social media and service delivery platforms on real life in recent years makes it worth paying attention to. Now, if you take an application like Strava, which provides this cost-free, beneficial service to users, has recently been causing us as a military some security concerns, you can see why soldiers who care about their fitness want to use it. But the information it generates is actually also useful for commanders, and it's potentially useful for policymakers. But instead, that information is going to people that we don't necessarily want to see it. We can tell the utility of social media platforms. So many units use them for their communications. And yet to do that, you've got to accept someone else's profit-driven terms and conditions. So park your concerns about whether like buttons are rewiring our brains or not. Now, owning our own versions of these platforms should not be beyond the bounds of possibility. And some of them already exist, for example, Defence Connect, and some that were mentioned by CGS this morning. It would be wise to invest more in these platforms. And when I say invest more, I mean at large scale with suitably secure hardware issued to individual level, as well as the associated software development costs. Now, it's difficult because digital social technologies are not something that we're used to investing in or counting as a capability by any stretch of imagination. But 10 years ago, they didn't even used to exist, and they have changed so much in the time that they have existed. I'm going to take two benefits of them, but there are others. But the two benefits I'd like to talk about now are the fact that they crowdsource effort, and in so doing, by making people do their own work, they empower individuals and make them feel part of the process, or make sure that they are a genuine part of the process. Imagine if you applied this in the military to career management, to take one narrow area. If you could have some kind of internal job market, could you improve transparency, flexibility, people's trust in the system, and drive meritocracy through more competition? I think probably. I think digital social technologies can help with things which are very, very difficult to do centrally, and then which severely disenfranchise people when they go wrong. And that's why I think they're worth investing in. But now, the reason I think this is so important is, and it's come up already this morning, it's impossible really to talk about capability and which capabilities we're going to need without considering context. Obviously, the future context is uncertain, and this is why we end up often with a gap between the capabilities we have and the capabilities we ultimately find ourselves needing. The one thing that really is certain is that we will use human capability to bridge that gap, and that's why we should look at how digital social technologies can reinforce military as a society in itself, and also consolidate the human capability that we know for definite we're going to need. I mentioned at the start that I was asked to speak about how information and computing capability will affect the land environment, and I honestly think it's systems like this that stand to make the biggest difference. Automated weapons and processes can help deliver some military effects, but as I said at the beginning, machine autonomy is useful insofar as it helps humans in the application of force. That's why I think the biggest and most certain payoff is to learn from the best of civilian technology and to support people through flexible careers and with better ways of working once they're actually at their jobs. Thank you.